and welcome everybody to the press conference for the joint meeting between the Acoustical Society of America and the Canadian Acoustics Association. This is our presentation at 2 p.m. today. We will have 3 presenters during the session, and after each presentation, the audience will have time for questions. Our first presenter is Paula Conlin from the University of Oklahoma, and she will present about the Indigenous Southern Plains flute tradition.
Comanche flute player Edward Wapp says that in many flute origin stories from the Southern Plains, power is attributed to good music, and there is a direct connection between good music and economic success. His statement about power and good music begs the question what criteria distinguish good from bad, hence my topic. I've tackled the question from 4 angles. What features epitomize a good flute? What are the musical elements of a good flute song? What qualities of the flute player are highly valued? And what is the flute player's role in their respective tribal community? My observations draw from a compilation of literary references, museum catalog cards, and personal communication with colleagues and Indigenous flute players and makers during the 20 years I taught Indigenous music at the University of Oklahoma in former Indian Territory, where the Southern Plains flute tradition originated. In traditional Plains culture, a young man could not speak with a young woman in private when they were not yet married. So the young men would use their flutes to serenade their future bride and encourage their love in preparation for their impending marriage. Each flute player had their own flute song they had made themselves for her alone. In Kiowa flute player Bilo Kozad's version of the flute origin story, a poor orphan boy who has no home goes up onto a mountain and stays there for 4 nights. While there, he is given a flute and flute music by a spirit who tells him to keep the flute as long as he lives, and he will have plenty. The boy becomes well off, gets a good woman, and raises children. The flute's external block sound mechanism is an ingenious device that is the equivalent of the interior whistle sound mechanism of the European recorder. A plug is inserted inside a hollowed-out tube of wood near the mouth hole end, and 2 holes are made on either side of the plug, and you can see that in the top part. A block of wood is tied onto the flute, covering the hole above the plug and leaving the hole below the plug partially open. The block guides the airstream across the plug and into the longer vibrating tube with the finger holes. Southern Plains flute players traditionally made their own flutes, fashioned after the bodily dimensions of the maker. The flute was the length of the flute maker's arm, the diameter was the size of his thumb, finger holes were a thumb width apart, the block was a handspan from the mouth hole end, and the first finger hole was a fist width from the lower end of the external block. The lowest tone on traditional Plains flute is frequently highlighted by the warble, an intense vibrato that creates a tremolo-like effect. The full vibrating lowest tone, with all finger holes closed, is one of the most distinctive features of traditional Plains flutes, and we're going to hear that in just a moment. Motives emphasizing the lowest note with its characteristic wobble serve as refrains. Refrains frequently occur at the beginning and end of the flute song, and between each repetition of the phrase or group of phrases that occur between the refrains. The prevalence of long-held notes on the flute's lowest tone is the distinctive feature of Southern Plains flute love songs, frequently resulting in the lowest tone being considered the tonal center of the overall song, even when it is not the most frequently played pitch. So the other things I have there for the minor 5-note scale, a lot of the flutes are 6 holes, but that allows the player to keep one finger down and create two different scale patterns to work from. The octave range that they have there's a vocal version there, and so a singer can sing a song and play a flute, and they're approximately the same range. The descending melodic contour is a very strong feature of a lot of Indigenous music, and so that's going to happen between the refrains. So you're going to hear brrr in one moment, and then it'll jump right up to the top and meander down again, and that would be the format of the song. A lot of times there's these little grace notes that the low note will go brrr and then brrr, brrr, and there's also just little ornamental notes throughout the song. When I've put flexible rhythm, what I mean by that is that you have these long notes on the refrain contrasting with quicker notes, and so it doesn't stay in one rhythm. Then at the end of the song, there's this upward slide, and it goes vroop. I'm aware of time, or I demonstrate it all on my flutes. I can do that after if you like. And followed by a quick release. So that would be another feature of the songs. And I've put verse and refrain that would match the vocal version there. And now, hopefully you can hear all that. So you can hear the two parts, the contrast between them. So the person you were listening to was Bilo Kozad. I'm going to focus on Bilo Kozad and Doctate Nevaquaya. So Bilo Kozad was born on the reservation, the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache reservation, before it was dismantled and long before Oklahoma statehood in November 1907. He maximized the gender qualities of the patrilineal Kiowa people, playing his flute with a strong male sound. He played solo flute only. He was considered to have outstanding performing ability, and he played the traditional repertoire for the flute, making both a flute and vocal version of his Kiowa love song. And Richard Payne, who's a flute authority, a collector and maker, he was saying that's the only song he had. You really need one, right? You have one woman, one song. And a lot of times they only had the one song. He also had an extensive overall music repertoire of traditional Kiowa songs and an in-depth knowledge of Kiowa culture, including Kiowa stories from the old days. So if we look at the features for the flutes that Bilo Kozad made epitomize the quintessential Southern Plains flute. His flutes were made of red cedar. They were the traditional size range of the length of a man's arm. His 6-hole flutes could play the minor 5-note scale that most of the songs are in. And he played on flutes he had made himself. Also, the craftsmanship was considered outstanding. In the chapter Culture and Aesthetics, ethnomusicologist Marcia Herndon contrasts the ego-centered emphasis of the West with the community-centered perspective of Indigenous North America. Bilo Kozad played a leadership role in his community. He made many flutes in the late 19th and early 20th centuries for his friends and protégés. He performed at Kiowa and other Indigenous gatherings whenever asked, right up until his passing in 1950. For many years, he worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, traveling to Indigenous residential schools in Oklahoma and beyond to give presentations, playing Kiowa flutes he had inherited and telling old Kiowa stories. He would admonish the Indigenous students at the school to remember the stories as long as they lived. Now the other gentleman, Doctate Nevaquaya, he's a little younger, and that's a whole other talk, but when Comanche artist and flute player Doctate Nevaquaya felt the need for inspiration for his art, he would take his flute to the Wichita Mountains near his home west of Apache in southwest Oklahoma and play his music by the water. Sometimes he wore the regalia of his Comanche ancestors. He says, I wanted to get that feeling in the same clothing, to climb up there and feel the wind. The music has been here already since time began, Doctate says. It is going around in this world, in the atmosphere. Somehow it comes and touches us, and we are inspired by some way by it. Then we just pick it up. We do not really make it. We do not make it ourselves. We just use what we hear by blending nature and sounds together. When Doc Tate was in Washington, D.C. in 1973, en route to play his flute at the National Folk Festival in Virginia, he took the opportunity to visit the Smithsonian Institution. When he returned home to Oklahoma, he told his family what he had discovered. They had some old recordings of Comanche flute music, he said. And Dad realized that the music he was producing was similar to the music that was played back in the late 1800s. So let's listen now to the beginning of Doc Tate's I Saw an Eagle Fly from his solo flute album, Comanche Flute Music, played by Doc Tate Nevaquaya. A minute? One more minute? Do I have another minute? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to just finish with, I'm going to throw something out there, okay? So that's my somewhat official. So if I get my another minute, here we have. We have addressed the 5 whys. Who, what, where, when, and why about Southern Plains flute love songs. And we know a little more about how to distinguish powerful, good music from the Southern Plains flute tradition. What we do not really know is how to access it. What if we take Doc Tate Nevaquaya's lead and go out into nature and take time to listen to and experience the sounds around us? Might we too also become receptive to the myriad of creative forces swirling about us and somewhere down the line access powerful, good music? Thank you.
And we will now have some time for questions. So the first question I would like to ask you is, you brought 4 flutes with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about a couple of the flutes and maybe play a little bit?
I didn't pay her to say that. Why I had that last bit is I started out with classical flute music, and I couldn't improvise to save my life. And I went to Nakai, our Carlos Nakai gives flute workshops. And he was teasing me that, anyway, so that's a long version of the story. So we go up on top of a mountain, and of course we're all supposed to create a song. And so I go up on top of the mountain and managed to get separated from everybody. It was one other person there. And this song comes to me. So here I am, the good old professor, writing it down, like transcribing it. And my song I called So Show Me the Path. And we were lost. And I go down, and there's these big orange markers, and I thought, this probably means something. And we ended up back home. And so that's and now I can improvise for hours on this, just any time at all. So, and so for me, it was powerful, good music. It showed me the path. So I'll play it. So I'll play that.
Beautiful. I have another question. Yes. So what differentiates the Courtship flute songs from other songs?
Okay. Try and give the short answer for that. There's many songs. The flute, and some of the flute origin stories, they'll talk about that the flute was the first instrumental music, and that so you have many songs. I'm not talking about Doc Tate Nevaquaya, but he'd be another topic which would address that. That one of the problems is that the flute songs, like Bilo Kosad, had one. I mean, they put his one song, which was one of my paragraphs I didn't read, the one song on this recording, the Library of Congress, and he became the expert. And then they put it on their compilation one in '97 with Woody Guthrie, for icons. And so he became that, but there's one song. But it was Doc Tate, Nevaquaya, who's the Comanche person I said who went out there and wanted to learn, wanted to play like that. He's the one who created different songs. That's why I chose I Saw an Eagle Fly, because that was from Seeing an Eagle Fly. So that one actually has a larger range, because the eagles have a larger range. So it's, there's a reason why it's different. Did that answer? Yeah. Okay.
Wendy, do we have any questions from the online audience?
Yes, we have a few. The first one is, what are Indigenous flutes made of today? Has the material changed?
Us diehards like cedar still, but it's name any wood. I have one, it's ebony. Doc Payne, he only ever made one because it was so hard to make. So, and it'll do the warble, like that. And so, yeah, they're all kinds of, but it's usually best if it's a soft grained wood. Yeah. So.
And the next question is, what are some other unique ways music is used in these cultures?
And I'm supposed to do this in how many minutes? Let's see. Prayer. You have Peyote Church, Native American Church, very much for prayer. You have it for the war songs, the war dance, for powwow. You have it so you have Comanche hymns. You have the Christianization, but they made it their own because the missionaries left and the Comanche lay ministers took over. Does that answer it a little bit? Okay.
Definitely, thank you. And I know you touched on this in your presentation, but what would you say, if put on the spot, what makes a flute song good?
I'll tell you my opinion on it. You derive power from allowing yourself to be vulnerable, playing your own song. So I think what makes it good is when it comes from the heart. And Timothy would agree with me. Timothy is Doc Tate's son. Here he has at peace with the Spirit of God. How could it not be powerful if you've gone out into the woods and you've just been there? So that's pretty much what I would say. It's not like you can have, when I first looked at this, I was writing for an archaeology, and they said, well, I just asked about good. If it serves its purpose, it's good. Well, what makes it good? So what I was trying to do today was tell you about the features of the songs that are considered good, the features of the flute, what the player does. What the player does is he serves his community. That's where the power is. It's on what you do for others, not what they do for you. And I think I feel like I'm waxing eloquent, but that's what, that's how I see it. I see it, that it allowed me to express myself in a way that I hadn't found before.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Here's my last question from the online audience. In present day, has this tradition been adopted by Indigenous people courting others regardless of their gender identity?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. I'm trying to think, who all do I know? And yes, absolutely. It's to show a love between people. When I was talking about male and female, that's your traditional origin story. If it's the first flute, to me, it's the Adam and Eve story. Bilo Kosad would say, all flute players come from that one flute player. So they come from that. Now, if you've got an indigenous culture, and traditional indigenous culture, traditionally the male goes out to hunt, and the women. You have these roles, but there's no reason for it to be gender specific. And I think not in Indigenous, I'm thinking up north, but also I find it a very beautiful society. If someone doesn't want to go out and fight or doesn't want to be the hunter, a lot of those people become shamans. And so they become voices for their people. And if the women want to fight, Comanche women, boy, they fight. You know, they were the fiercest warriors because that's what they wanted to do. It isn't like you can't do what you feel you need to do to serve your community. That's what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful presentation.